Why did the Washington Commanders change their name? Trump demands new reversal explained. Why did the Commanders decide to change their name? President Trump is calling on Washington to revert back to its former identity. The Washington Commanders believed they had finally moved past the controversy surrounding their name, but the political climate in the nation's capital has a tendency to revisit historical debates. This off-season, the team secured a deal to return to their previous home at the RFK Stadium site and also unveiled a fresh take on their classic Super Bowl-era uniforms, which some speculate could hint at a future jersey rebranding. However, plans for the stadium have hit a snag as Mayor Muriel Bowser engages in a struggle with the Washington, D.C. Council to gain approval. The mayor has voiced her concerns regarding the deal, and the Commanders may face additional hurdles in their future endeavors. Now, the Commanders are confronted with yet another potential challenge in their quest for a stadium deal, this time from the president himself. On July 20th, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that he might obstruct the deal if the team does not revert to its original name. "I may impose a restriction that if they do not change the name back to the original Washington Redskins and eliminate the absurd name Washington Commanders, I will not support a deal for them to construct a stadium in Washington," Trump stated on Truth Social. Let's delve into how we arrived at this point, exploring the reasons behind the Commanders' name change, the possibility of reverting to the old name, and the president's comments on the matter. Why did the Commanders change their name? The NFL team based in Washington adopted the name Commanders prior to the 2022 season, following 2 years of being known as the Washington Football Team. This change was driven by mounting pressure against the previous name, which had become increasingly controversial. Originally established in 1932 as the Boston Braves, the franchise changed its name after just one season to a title that many consider offensive to Native Americans. This name persisted through the team's relocation to Washington in 1937 and remained unchanged until it became untenable ahead of the 2020 season. In the wake of George Floyd's tragic death in Minnesota, nationwide protests erupted against police brutality and systemic racism. This social upheaval also cast a spotlight on Washington's team, which began to feel significant pressure from major sponsors like FedEx, Nike, and PepsiCo. In 2020, Adweek reported that 87 investment firms, collectively worth $620 billion, sent a letter to some of the team's largest sponsors, FedEx, Nike, and PepsiCo, urging them to cut ties with the team unless they agreed to change the name. Former owner Dan Snyder had long been adamant that the name would never change. "We will never change the name of the team," Snyder declared to USA Today Sports in 2013. "As a lifelong fan, I believe that our supporters understand the rich tradition and significance of the name, and we feel fortunate to be preparing for the next season." Despite facing years of lawsuits and pressure from Native American advocacy groups, Snyder remained resolute in his stance. "We will never change the name. It's that simple. Never," you can use all caps. However, the threats from sponsors proved to be a turning point for Snyder, leading to the decision to retire the old name ahead of the 2020 season and initiate a search for a new identity. "We are announcing that we will retire the former name and logo upon completion of this review," the team stated, adding that officials were working closely to develop a new name and design approach that will enhance the standing of our proud, tradition-rich franchise and inspire our sponsors, fans, and community for the next century. What has Trump said about the Commanders' name change? Trump has been a prominent figure throughout the Commanders' recent rebranding and controversies. The shift away from the contentious name occurred during his first term, and now the stadium deal has taken center stage during his second. The president has consistently opposed the name change but expressed a different sentiment earlier this month when discussing the team's return to the RFK site. "It doesn't have the same ring to me," he remarked to reporters on July 7th. "But, winning can make everything sound good. So, if they win, all of a sudden, the Commanders sounds good, but I wouldn't have changed it." While Trump has not favored the name change, his tone has shifted from his comments in 2020. Teams are named out of strength, not weakness, but now the Washington Redskins and Cleveland Indians, two legendary sports franchises, appear to be changing their names to be politically correct, he tweeted in response to the initial name change. He reiterated this stance on July 20, threatening to block the new stadium deal unless the team reverted to its former name. I may impose a restriction that if they do not change the name back to the original Washington Redskins and eliminate the ridiculous name Washington Commanders, I will not support a deal for them to build a stadium in Washington, Trump later posted. The team would be much more valuable, and the deal would be more exciting for everyone, he added, suggesting that the Cleveland Guardians should also reconsider their name. It remains uncertain what influence the president has in this situation, especially since Congress transferred control of the RFK Stadium land to the city with the passage of the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium Campus Revitalization Act earlier this year. Will the Commanders change their name? A return to the old controversial nickname seems unlikely, given the current stance of the team's leadership. Team owner Josh Harris appeared to dismiss the idea of reverting to the old name during a press conference in February. Now, in this building, the name Commanders holds significance, Harris stated. It represents players who are passionate about football, excel at their craft, play hard, and are mentally tough. It's meaningful that this name is gaining significance. While acknowledging the team's history, Harris emphasized that the name is here to stay. I believe it is now embraced by our team, our culture, and our coaching staff. Therefore, we are moving forward with it. Not only have the Commanders shown no desire to revert to their previous name, but NFL regulations also suggest that such a change may not be feasible at this time. Any name change would likely coincide with new jerseys, and the NFL's uniform rules come into play. According to Resolution G3 from 2002, a team cannot change its jerseys more than once every 5 years. Since the team just introduced new jerseys ahead of the 2022 season, they cannot make another switch until 2027. There is a provision for extenuating circumstances that could allow for a quicker rebranding, but this is determined by the commissioner, and factors like relocation and ownership changes are considered extenuating. Any name change would also require league approval, as was the case in 2020 when Washington first transitioned to the Commanders. What has Trump said about the Cleveland Guardians? The Commanders are not the only team that has faced scrutiny regarding their name. The MLB's Cleveland Guardians also attracted Trump's criticism, with him suggesting they should revert to their former name. Cleveland made the change ahead of the 2022 MLB season, 3 years after they retired the Chief Wahoo mascot and logo. Trump labeled it as an example of cancel culture in a 2020 tweet, indicating his disapproval of the decision. The Guardians ultimately decided to change their name after team owner Paul Dolan shifted his perspective, acknowledging the evolving societal landscape in the wake of the social unrest in 2020. Terry McLaurin contract crisis, Commanders WR Holdout explained. Terry McLaurin's contract dilemma with the Commanders is far from straightforward. Ashburn, Virginia. Are you curious about how Brandon Coleman, the newly appointed starting right guard for the Washington Commanders, is adapting to the pre-snap checks alongside center Tyler Biadasz? No? Perhaps you're interested in something else? Unfortunately, there was no miraculous last-minute agreement reached between the Commanders and wide receiver Terry McLaurin as of Tuesday morning, at least not before General Manager Adam Peters and Coach Dan Quinn conducted their pre-training camp press conference. What remains is a palpable divide between the star receiver and the only franchise he has known since entering the NFL in 2019. There are no indications, aside from Peters' polite remarks about the soon-to-be 30-year-old, that this situation will be resolved anytime soon, especially not with training camp set to commence on Wednesday. Peters expressed his expectation that McLaurin would report, yet McLaurin was absent from both the full team meeting and the afternoon conditioning test. Thus, the saga begins. Without a doubt, I think everyone in this building values Terry very much, Peters stated. We recognized that from the start last year, and even more so after spending a year with him. We've had recent discussions, and we plan to continue those conversations. We will do everything possible to finalize a deal. Terry McLaurin, who just completed a career-best season with 13 touchdown receptions, has voiced his frustration while pursuing a new contract extension. This is not the kind of reassurance fans want to hear. What they long to hear is, Terry exemplifies what we value in a Commanders player. We are committed to compensating our top players fairly, reflecting their worth both to our team and across the league. We've made some adjustments, and Terry has too, to ensure he's present for the start of camp and is compensated near the top of the current market for his position. This would imply that, based on insights from knowledgeable sources, McLaurin should be offered a contract slightly exceeding that of DK Metcalf, the current Pittsburgh Steelers receiver who secured a 4-year extension worth nearly $132 million this spring after his trade from the Seattle Seahawks. Metcalf, who is over 2 years younger than McLaurin, was the last pick in the second round of the same 2019 draft class, while McLaurin was selected 76th overall in the third round. Notably, that draft also featured other prominent receivers like A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, Hollywood Brown, Mecole Hardman, and N'Keal Harry. Let's set aside the top 2 receivers in the league, as widely recognized, Ja'Marr Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals and Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. They occupy a league of their own. Chase is the highest-paid receiver in the NFL, boasting an average annual value, AAV, of $40.25 million on his 4-year, $161 million contract. Jefferson follows closely with an AAV of $35 million on his 4-year, $140 million deal. No one, except perhaps those sharing the surname McLaurin, can credibly argue that he deserves a higher AAV than Chase or Jefferson. If that is indeed the stance of McLaurin and/or his representatives, they are mistaken. However, I doubt that is their position. With his recent extension, Metcalf now ranks 4th among NFL receivers in AAV at $32.99 million, just behind CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys, who has an AAV of $34 million. Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets recently jumped into 5th place among receivers with his new 4-year, $130 million extension, which carries an AAV of $32.5 million. A.J. Brown, with an AAV of $32 million, is now 6th, while Deebo Samuel's AAV of $23.85 million places him 15th among NFL receivers. Currently, McLaurin sits 2 spots below Samuel with an AAV of $23.2 million. Who stands out as the best from the 2019 draft class? The answer is subjective. Here's a look at some of the top receivers from that class and their performance since entering the league. Stats sourced from Pro Football Focus, Pro Football Reference, NFL Next Gen Stats, and Sumo Sports. Player receptions targets 2024 grade, PFF, 2024 drop, PFF, career receiving yards career TDS 2024 YAC 2024 yards per route, Sumo. A.J. Brown 446 695 90.9 89.8 7026 55.33.45. Terry McLaurin 460 726 84.8 80.2 6379 38 3.62.39. DK Metcalf 438 726 74.6 80.8 6324 48 41.88. Deebo Samuel 334 510 72.1 60.6 4792 42 8.31.79. Jacoby Meyers 393 579 78.5 90.9 4592 22 3.41.88. Mecole Hardman 178 258 67.9 79.4 2302 19 8.3, 12 catches, 1.44. If the McLaurin camp believes he has outperformed Metcalf since 2019, the statistics are indeed close. These figures do not encompass all relevant wide receiver metrics. There are various advanced statistics that could be deemed more or less significant. This is merely a selection of numbers that hold some relevance to the position. However, even if we accept the pro-McLaurin argument, the Commanders can counter that Metcalf is over 2 years younger and that this extension should focus on McLaurin's future contributions rather than his past achievements. He has already been compensated for his previous performance. In response, McLaurin might argue that he has not missed a single game in 4 years and has maintained a low profile regarding fines and penalties, unlike Metcalf, who has had several altercations with opposing players and occasionally teammates. There's a reason Seattle was willing to part ways with Metcalf, while McLaurin continues to be cherished in the DC area. The Commanders will counter that regardless of Metcalf's on-field behavior, they should not feel compelled to react to a contract that, depending on perspective, could be seen as either a natural adjustment in the wide receiver market or an excessive expenditure by a team eager to provide a reliable target for 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers. Thus, the challenge lies in acknowledging McLaurin's past, his durability and dependability, present, his high regard within the Commanders' newly revamped locker room, and future. The cultural shift is essential, but Jayden Daniels needs to connect with his WR1 in the coming weeks to prepare for the season. The Commanders must offer him a salary that reflects market value while also preserving their financial resources for upcoming contract negotiations with key players like left tackle Lammie Tunsil, cornerback Mazhun Lattimore, linebacker Frankie Louvu, and others. Yes, that's likely the complex aspect of any negotiation, figuring all of that out while understanding the market, our team dynamics, and our financial situation, Peters remarked. I can't recall being involved in a negotiation that was entirely straightforward and smooth. However, grasping where they stand and where we are, and working to bridge that gap, is the essence of the negotiation process. Maintaining transparency and negotiating in good faith are crucial to reaching an agreement. My stance remains unchanged from last week. The Commanders ought to compensate McLaurin as a top 10 receiver, because he undeniably is one. This is not solely based on statistics but also on his significance to the locker room and the community. The fact that Metcalf's contract complicates discussions is a common occurrence in every sport, at every position, every year. The market is perpetually evolving. But here's the reality: the salary cap never decreases. There will always be sufficient funds to ensure that players receive fair compensation for their contributions on the field. I assure you, Daniels is taking notes. Some might argue that managing partner Josh Harris should step in, become the hero of the press conference, grant McLaurin his desired contract, and boldly proclaim how they prioritize their own players. However, that would be a grave mistake. That's precisely the approach Dan Snyder would take. Nothing could fracture a locker room faster than players realizing, as they did under Snyder, that some players were favored by the owner while others were not. Such dynamics make it challenging for any player, regardless of their skills or history. Commanders' bold stand, McLaurin holdout, contract talks and team future explained. Here's a bold statement: the Washington Commanders' future hinges on one man, Terry McLaurin. But here's where it gets controversial. As the team's training camp kicks off, McLaurin's absence isn't just about money, it's about respect, value, and the kind of organization the Commanders want to be. General Manager Adam Peters has made it crystal clear: the team wants McLaurin under contract long-term. But why is this such a big deal? Let's break it down. Since joining the team in 2019, McLaurin has been the Commanders' most reliable offensive weapon. He's a 5-time 1,000-yard receiver, a locker room leader, and a steady force during turbulent times. Now, with the team on the rise under head coach Dan Quinn and quarterback Jayden Daniels, locking down McLaurin isn't just smart, it's essential. And this is the part most people miss: his holdout isn't confrontational, it's calculated. He's not just fighting for himself, he's securing his future with the team he's helped elevate. Peters didn't shy away from addressing the situation. He praised McLaurin's professionalism, his impact on the locker room, and his importance to Daniels. But here's the kicker: Peters also admitted the urgency to finalize a deal, acknowledging the twists and turns of contract negotiations. "We are dealing with a really good player and a really good person," Peters said. But will words turn into action? That's the million-dollar question. McLaurin's value goes beyond stats. In 2024, he hauled in 82 receptions for 1,096 yards and 13 touchdowns, all while dealing with a revolving door at quarterback. His precise route running, strong hands, and football IQ make him a safety net for Daniels and a game-changer downfield. Without him, the offense loses its dynamism, even with additions like Deebo Samuel. And let's not forget the locker room. McLaurin has been a team captain multiple times, leading by example and earning the respect of veterans and rookies alike. But timing is everything. The Commanders are coming off a playoff season, with high hopes for the NFC East. Losing McLaurin, or letting this drama drag on, could derail their momentum. Financially, the team is in a solid position to get a deal done, but McLaurin's camp is likely aiming for a contract in the $32 to $34 million per year range, comparable to stars like A.J. Brown and C.D. Lamb. Is he worth it? For a player who's never complained, always produced, and stuck with Washington through regime changes, the answer seems obvious. Here's the controversial question: are the Commanders willing to pay the price for loyalty and consistency? Or will they risk losing a cornerstone of their franchise? Peters has said the right things, but now it's time for action. McLaurin has given everything to this team. Now, it's Washington's turn to show he's still a vital part of their present and future. What do you think? Is McLaurin worth the price tag, or should the Commanders take a harder line? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments.